Today we're going to talk about common modulations in jazz standards and how you can execute some of those concepts in your improvising. Hi, I'm Dr. Rob McWilliams and I teach here at the Jazz Music Institute, where we are creating a world where everybody can learn to improvise and play jazz. So today's topic of modulations. Most of our jazz standards we play will typically modulate, and oftentimes more than once. So understanding how some of those common modulations work and how best to play over them can be really helpful in your improvising. Oftentimes those modulations occur into what we call the bridge or the B section of a song, which if it's a 32-bar form, would be the third 8 bars of the form. So hearing the modulations can help you learn the tunes and then also see the common ground between one tune and another where the same modulation is occurring, but it's just in a different song. So that by definition, a modulation is when we have a progression, a dominant 7th chord that by definition exists in only one key and resolves a particular way. So if I play a G7 chord, that belongs only in the key of C because the tendency tones in that chord, which are the 3rd and the 7th, have very strong resolution pulls to there. So that chord, by definition, resolves to that C major chord. So anytime we have a dominant 7th, effectively we're establishing the key that dominant 7th exists in. So one of the really common modulations in the repertoire is upper 4th, upper perfect 4th, up to what we can be labelled the subdominant key. One of the ways that we hear that happening in the repertoire is turning the 1 chord, when it's serving as a tonic initially, turning it into a dominant chord and resolving it then into the key that belongs to, which is upper 4th. So if I establish the key of C, and then turn that 1 chord into a dominant chord and resolve it, we've now modulated upper 4th into the key of F. Sometimes, or more commonly in the jazz repertoire, that modulation has a 2 chord prior to the dominant chord. So the 2 chord from the original key will actually be a minor 7th chord on the 5th degree of the key. So if I'm in the key of C, and I play a minor 7th chord on the 5th of that key, which is G minor 7, resolving to the dominant C7, resolving to the new tonic. So now we have modulated upper 4th into the key of F. So we'll hear it mostly like that in the repertoire. The other common usage is when we have a progression that ends up in the dominant chord on the 2nd degree of the key we're in, but then instead of resolving that dominant to where it would normally go, we turn it into a minor 7th, and then that resolves to the dominant of the key we're in back to the home key. So for example, key of C. Now I go up to the dominant chord on the 2nd degree. Now instead of resolving that where it would want to go to here, we go from that dominant chord, turn it into a minor chord to its related dominant, which is G7, and we end up back where we started in the key of C. That's another common usage of that idea of modulating upper 4th. So let's actually look at some practical examples of songs that use this one modulation, this upper 4th modulation. In some of the early jazz, it was a very direct modulation based on arriving on the 1 chord, turning it into that dominant chord, and then resolving. For example, in Bill Bailey in the key of F. Then we go 1 dominant, resolve. Now we've modulated into the key of B flat, upper 4th. Another earlier tune, Careless Love, does a similar thing right at the very beginning of the song. So we start on the tonic chord, that becomes a dominant chord, and then it modulates into the key upper 4th from F into B flat. So that one sounds like this. There's our 1 dominant, resolve. So now we're in the key of B flat, we've modulated. Let me give you some examples now where we go via the 2 chord, then the dominant chord. So the 2 minor 7 chord going to 5 dominant 7 and then resolving into the new key. So Don't Get Around Much Anymore is a good example of a song that does that. I'll just play the end of the section before the modulation. Now we're in the key of F. So we started in C, we've now modulated into the key of F, into the bridge. These next examples are all tunes that modulate upper fourth as we go into the bridge. Another one that does that is Lady Be Good. I'll play the end of the A section and you'll hear the modulation again by going to the 5 minor 7 chord, to the 1 dominant chord, resolving into the new key. So the end of the A section. There's our dominant resolving. Now we're in the key of B flat, which is upper fourth from F. What's New also does that. So I'll play once again the end of the A section, modulating into the bridge. So that's the key of C, then we go 1 dominant. So the bridge has now arrived in the key of F, which is upper fourth from C, so it's the same modulation again. Another very well-known standard, Take the A Train, does the same thing. I'll play the end of the A section and you'll hear the modulation upper fourth. So this is in the key of C and it goes to G minor 7, C7, and then we end up in F, upper fourth. And there we are in the bridge, we're upper fourth into the key of F. So some songs modulate not straight away at the bridge, but they modulate from the start of the bridge. So this modulation actually occurs at the start of the bridge. So a good example of that is tune September in the Rain. So when we get to the B section here, we'll hear the 5 minor 7 chord, and then the second bar of the B section is the 1 dominant chord. So the actual new tonic chord is the 3rd bar of the bridge as opposed to the 1st bar of the bridge, which it was in those other examples. So here's the end of the A section of that tune. So that's 5 minor, 1 dominant. Now we're in the new key in the 3rd bar of the bridge. We're in A flat, having been in E flat, so we've gone upper fourth again. Some tunes actually cut short, giving you all of the chords of the original key and modulate before you even get to the last chord of the initial key. So a good example of that is the tune Have You Met Miss Jones? We're now on the 6th chord, but we go straight to 5 minor to 1 dominant. And now we're in the key of the 4, which is B flat. So that one didn't even get back to the first initial tonic key before it did the modulation. Now those are all tunes that modulate at the point of the bridge in some way, or the 3rd 8 bars of an AEBA form. But then modulations to the 4 chord can happen anywhere in the progression, anywhere in the song really, and that's also very common. So a tune called Triste, in the last A section actually has this same modulation during the A section. So let's have I'll play the example of the very last 8 bars of Triste. There's our 5 minor, 1 dominant. Now we're in the key of the 4, E flat major. Another tune that works similarly is in the closer to the start of the song, is in a mellow tone. So we're in the key of A flat, but you'll hear in the 5th bar the 5 minor chord going to 1 dominant, resolving upper fourth. So here's in a mellow tone from the beginning. Now here's our 5 minor, 1 dominant, resolve. Now we're in the key of D flat, upper fourth from where we started. The last 8 bars of The Song Is You also demonstrates this concept. So let me play from the start of the last 8 bars and you'll hear we have a modulation upper fourth in the 6th bar that we play here. So key of C, then 5 minor, 1 dominant, and now we've resolved upper fourth into the key of F. So once again, it's the same modulation. Some tunes will make that modulation very early in the song. A couple of examples of that. Cherokee starts in the key of B flat with the tonic chord in the 1st bar, but then straight away in the 3rd bar we hear the 5 minor chord, the 1 dominant. So the bar 5 is already in the new key of E flat upper fourth. So here's Cherokee. 5 minor, 1 dominant. and now in the key of E flat upper fourth. Another very well-known example of that modulation right at the start of the tune is a tune called Misty, which starts in E flat major, but then in the second bar we hear the 5 minor, 1 dominant, and we're in the new key upper fourth in bar 3. 5 minor, 1 dominant, now we're in a new key of A flat upper fourth. So, and then we also have tunes that, as I said in the first part, where we modulate via this 2 dominant seventh on the second degree of the key. So instead of that dominant resolving where we expect it to, which would be a key upper fifth from our home key, it just turns that dominant into a minor chord, so it becomes 2 minor, then we go to 5/7, and we're back in the key we started. So, and a good example of that is the tune All of Me. So I'll just play the end of the A section here. So we're in 6 minor. That's our 2 dominant. Now we would expect that dominant chord to resolve to there, but in this song it doesn't. We hear turn that to minor, to 5, and then we're back where we started in our home key of C major. Another song that does exactly the same principle. So we hear the 6 chord, we hear the 2, but a dominant 7th chord on 2, and then convert it into a minor chord is another U. So I'll pick it up partway through the tune. 6 minor, there's our 2 dominant, then turn that to minor, dominant, back to our tonic key of E flat. Another tune that does exactly the same principle, There Is No Greater Love, where we hear the 6 chord, then resolving that to 2 dominant chord, turn that to a minor chord, go to the 5 chord, resolve back to our key. So here is No Greater Love in the key of B flat. Here's our 2 dominant, turn it to minor, 5 dominant, and we're back where we started. So instead of taking it into the key we expect that dominant to do, it brings us back to the original key. So it's modulating upper fourth effectively the same way. So all of those songs, and there are so many examples where modulating upper fourth happens within the song or into the bridge. If you can start to hear that modulation as it's occurring, then you can learn tunes really much, much faster, because there's only a limited number of modulations, and certain modulations occur more often in the repertoire than others. And upper fourth is one of the modulations that is really everywhere in so many songs. So if you can start to hear that and work on how to play over that, you'll become a much more effective improviser. So in order to improvise more effectively over this modulation, one of the key things to pay attention to is that as we go from, here's our established key of C, the key thing that changes is this note, which is the 7th degree of the C major 7 chord. When we modulate, that natural becomes down a half step, in the 5 minor chord, or then the same note on the 1 dominant chord, which then resolves to the 3rd of the new key. So whenever we have a 7-3 resolution, it's always really a strong way to use in your improvising. So if I improvise using that concept over that modulation, so I'll do a progression in C, then I'll modulate. I made use of that 7-3 modulation. So that's the key thing to work on improvising and hearing this, is that one change between the 1 major chord, when we're going to go the modulation to either the 5 minor 7, that note there, which is the B natural over the C major 7 chord, becomes B flat over the 5 minor 7, which is then the 7th of the 1 dominant, resolving to the 3rd of the new key. That's a really strong way to play over the progression. So hopefully you learnt something from today's session on modulation. Please leave us a comment, tell us what you'd like to see more videos on to help you with your playing, and I hope you've gained something from today's session.